Nabyl, we are very glad that you accepted our invitation. Welcome to the council. Ernesto, you are the director of this event. Please.
Bueno, buenas tardes con todos. Me conozco, yo dijera que por mínimo con la mitad de los que están aquí presentes, entonces me da mucho gusto verlos y también a todos los demás, mucho gusto. Alberto también, muchísimas gracias. No sé, acá estás, Alberto. También muchísimas gracias por permitirnos tener este foro de conversación, porque Nabyl va a presentar, pero lo que nos va a dar es realmente, como utilizando el anglicismo, food for thought, ¿no? Nos va a dar es alimento para el pensamiento, porque vamos a hablar de innovación, pero no de la innovación incremental tradicional, sino de la innovación digital, disruptiva, exponencial, que por mucho que en Ecuador sintamos que estamos semicerrados todavía, no es así realmente. No es así realmente. El Ecuador no está exento a todos los cambios disruptivos que se están dando en el mundo hoy mientras hablamos, porque los cambios son exponenciales. Les hablará mucho Nabyl sobre esto en su exposición. Muchos me conocen por mi ámbito académico, que lo mantengo, pero junto a Ricardo Noboa, que está con Nabyl, Ricardo Noboa y yo somos partners de ROKK3R. Tenemos 3 años colaborando con la empresa. Primero, pues, trabajamos en formato de alianza estratégica hasta que finalmente fuimos parte de ROKK3R y nos convertimos en partners de la compañía. Entonces, tenemos también, además de presentarles a Ricardo, acompaña a Nabyl y ha venido de Miami también Germán Montoya, que es el Chief Exponential Officer de ROKK3R, cofundador junto a Nabyl y otras personas más también, ¿no? Cofundador de la empresa. Entonces nos acompaña Germán, quería que también lo conozcan. Y sin más, quiero presentarles a Nabyl Charania, que es el CEO de ROKK3R. Entonces lo tengo escrito para que no se me pase algún detalle, ¿no? Entonces Nabyl, como socio cofundador y CEO de ROKK3R, una co-constructora o company builder de startups tecnológicos exponenciales, porque eso es lo que intentamos hacer, con sede en Miami, trabaja de cerca con tomadores de decisiones en los sectores privado y público alrededor del mundo para generar valor a sus accionistas y contribuir al desarrollo de la sociedad en general. Nabyl sostiene que en menos de una década el 40% de las empresas Fortune 500 no existirán y que en los próximos 5 años 3.000 millones de personas adicionales estarán conectadas a la Internet. Es decir, la Internet será un commodity en todo el planeta. Yo estoy totalmente de acuerdo con eso. Y consecuentemente se pregunta cuál será el impacto de esta nueva era digital en el ser humano y en los negocios. Y cómo el espíritu innovador de pequeñas y grandes corporaciones evolucionará para construir un mundo completamente nuevo. Son inquietudes válidas, son preguntas abiertas y preguntas que todos nosotros tenemos que hacernos en esta época. Sostiene también que la visión de ROKK3R es cerrar la brecha entre corporaciones, startups y la innovación eficiente, proveyendo servicios de innovación para convertir pequeñas y medianas empresas tradicionales en negocios digitales y exponenciales. Piensa que la era digital, en lugar de pertenecer al mundo del mañana, ocurre ahora, por lo que trabaja ayudando a los tomadores de decisiones y a las organizaciones a crear huellas con visión de futuro para no solamente mantenerse relevantes hoy, sino prosperar y sobresalir, que es lo que queremos todos nosotros en nuestros negocios. Actualmente Nabyl preside el directorio de ROKK3R también. Es General Partner y fundador de ROKK3R Fuel, un fondo de capital privado y de riesgo que es parte del ecosistema de ROKK3R, y es miembro del directorio de Hyper y Mobilized, 2 startups co-creadas en ROKK3R, de las que ustedes también van a escuchar un poco en la charla de Nabyl. Antes de su presente en ROKK3R, fundó Decipher Labs Inc., empresa en la que fue Managing Director. Entre el 2008 y 2009, director de soluciones de negocios en Liquid Analytics, entre otros puestos y cargos que también ha desempeñado en su rol de emprendedor. Y en cuanto a sus credenciales académicas, Nabyl estudió matemáticas, Sistemas de Información y Negocios en la Universidad de Waterloo. Entonces, Nabyl, all yours and thank you.
So, can you guys hear me? Good? My Spanish is not as good as your English, probably, so I'm going to do it in English, and hopefully we can get the most out of it. I want to start by giving you a little bit of context. So, I grew up in Kenya, in East Africa, and left when I was 15 to go to Canada. Went to school, like Ernesto said, in Canada. My background is mathematics and computer science. And right after school, joined a startup that at that time was doing SMS billing services for telcos in the late 90s. So everybody was texting in Europe, but the companies didn't know how to charge you for it. So what we did is we built some of the first SMS billing platforms for British Telco, for Viag, for Deutsche Telekom. And I was able to sell my piece of that company. And then I created another company in Florida this time where we did predictive and anomaly engines for voice over IP. So basically a company called Convergys that has all the global call centers. So if you call your American Express or the state of Florida, it's our software that runs in the background that allows the agents to actually help you on the phone. And I sold that company in 2006. I ended up staying on for 3 years in a big corporation as a director there. And at first, I thought this was going to be the most fun time of my life, right? Because for the first time, I was not a startup. I was part of a big company. I had big budgets. I had, thousands of people that would, work on what I said we would work on. And it became the most frustrating experience of my life. So for those 3 years where I thought, I could do a lot more with all these resources, I ended up basically facing a lot of challenges, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And so when my period of non-compete ended and I could go do what I wanted to do, I ended up in Miami. And at that time in Miami, people were starting to want to build companies based on technology. So what ended up happening is people would come to me and say, hey, I have this great idea. Can you help me? But what that really meant was, can you write me a check, invest in my company, and leave me alone, right? So I did that for a year, 2 years, and I realized it was a very good way to lose a lot of money very quickly, right? But it wasn't because the ideas were bad or because the people were bad. It's when you're trying to build a company that is based on technology, there are specific things that you can do to mitigate the risk associated with innovation. So at that point in time, I met my partner Herman, and we were both investing in the same companies, and we realized, hey, we have the expertise from technology to strategy to go to market. What we should do is, instead of just investing capital, we should actually work on these companies so that we can mitigate the risk of that company being successful. And so that's how we started ROKK3R. But what formed the basis of our belief about 7 years ago in actually launching ROKK3R was that the world was experiencing a monumental shift. And what we like to say is we're living in the most extraordinary time in human history, right? And why do we say that? And the reason why is, even as compared to 10 years ago, each and every single one of us here today has more power in terms of the information we have than any president, than any corporation, than any government did 10 years ago, right? That is a big shift in how the world is operating today. But when we looked at it a little deeper, what we wanted to try and understand is, why is this happening? And to do that, we had to go back to understanding how technology is changing the world we're living in. So I put this slide up there, but I'm going to just talk about it a little bit. And the idea is to give you an understanding of the changes that happened in the price and the power of computing, which are driving all of the change today. So in about 1975 to 1980s, the first personal computers were launched, right? The Apple Mac II was a popular computer. And at that time, $1,000 bought you, very little processing power, almost as much as a calculator did about 15 years ago. But as you move forward, around 2001, the same $1,000 bought you the processing power of a small insect brain. You move forward another 10 years, the same $1,000 gets you the processing power of a mouse brain. And now in about another 5 to 8 years, the same $1,000 is going to buy you the processing power of one human brain. So it's actually really interesting to understand what's happening in terms of the computing, and it's being driven by what we call Moore's Law, which is computing power gets faster, it gets smaller, and it gets cheaper almost every 18 to 24 months. So that is what's driving a lot of change. So when we say we're living in the most exciting times in history, it's because after the Industrial Revolution, this is the most exciting time where humans, who have not had an upgrade in 50 million years, right? We have never had a software upgrade. Our brains are just what they are, but we are able to create exponential technologies. We are able to do things like 3D printing, like robotics, like artificial intelligence, like DNA sampling and testing. CRISPR, for example. People are editing their cats so that their cats glow in the dark. You can find this on YouTube and do it in your own house. So we are building technology today that is exponential in the impact that it has on society. And the reason that it's even more exciting is that for the first time, as opposed to just one technology taking off, we have about 7 or 8 technologies that at the same time are becoming exponential technologies. So when you start combining things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, healthcare, you start realizing that they're now using, exponential technologies to drive advances in healthcare, for example, in cancer detection. So traditionally, it would be a person in a lab looking at a microscope day in and day out trying to figure out if cells were cancerous. That type of task is completely scalable by a computer, which is actually even much more efficient and effective and doesn't get tired and doesn't have to go home at 5 o'clock. So the advances that we're seeing is basically changing the world we live in. So all the way from computational power to technologies that are being built with the combination of this, we're seeing an acceleration in the types of technologies that are available to us. At the same time, what we have is this phenomenon of connectivity. So as Ernesto was saying earlier, we have about 4 billion people connected on the internet today. 4 billion people. In the next 5 to 8 years, another 4 billion people are going to get connected to the internet. So adding 4 billion new minds to the internet becomes a very, very interesting thing, because not only are these people going to be trillions of dollars of commerce, but they're also people that are going to want to be creators. They're people that are going to be part of an ecosystem of building new modes of creating value, or creating a life for themselves based on the internet. So just to give you an example, with all these people that are coming online, it took 16 years once the internet was launched for the first billion people to get onto the internet. And that happened in about 2009, 2010. From 2010 to 2014, we basically went from 1 billion to 3.8 billion people in about 4 years. In 2014 to the end of 2018, we added another billion people, over 4 billion people connected on the internet. And at the rate at which people are coming on the internet, we're going to have about 2.7 billion people come online about every 18 months. So we are getting to this point where pretty much the whole world is going to be connected. And what that's doing is it's changing the fundamental economic structure. And what I mean by that is, we all went to school where when you learned economics was taught as supply and demand. If you were able to control the supply of something, you can drive up the demand and effectively drive up the price, and you can control the market. But what happens when you have 4 billion to 8 billion people coming online? The model is shifting to an economy that is driven by information access, by data. Think about a company like Netflix. So Netflix basically has a lot of subscribers all over the world, but what they're able to do now is based on the data that they gather from all these users, they are now building their own shows. They're filming and writing their own scripts. And those are becoming the most watched shows on Netflix because they're leveraging the power of the crowd. And they're giving it as a subscription. So as opposed to a traditional movie model where someone has to fund the movie, the studio has to get involved, you have the marketing company, you have a whole basically ecosystem around it, Netflix went completely the other way. Let's make it as cheap as we can to get as many people online, and then we are going to make the money by providing better content. So what's also happening is that for the first time, it's becoming more accessible for smaller groups of people, for students, for inventors, for entrepreneurs to tackle problems that were once only the realm of, a government or a big corporation. Even 10 years ago, if you wanted to build something around using a lot of data and machine learning and artificial intelligence, you couldn't do it. It would cost you too much just to buy the computers. It would cost you to, run the processing. But you fast forward to, 2018, you could be sitting here in Ecuador, you could be in Colombia, you could be in Bombay, you could be in Nairobi. You have access to cloud computing at dollars a month. So instead of paying $1,000 for a computer, you're paying $7 a month to access some of the fastest computers on the cloud. That access to computing power, that access to all the information is making it possible now for small teams to become entrepreneurs. And they're tackling problems across the world. So what used to be scarce, if you think about the model I was talking about, scarcity and abundance. So in the beginning, when the internet first launched, how many of you had internet in like 2005? Few people? How fast was it? 120, right? So that model was very scarce, right? Very few people had it. It was very slow, and it cost a lot of money. And you fast forward now, there's free Wi-Fi everywhere, 5G is launching, bandwidth, which used to be the scarcity, is now becoming abundant. Everybody wants you to access the internet, from Facebook to Google to Amazon. All of them want you on the internet so that they can sell you the service that they're providing. So we've moved from that model of bandwidth being a scarcity to being an abundant abundant resource. And then the other thing that's happening is there's abundance of capital in the world. More people are doing more experiments, and more investors, more people that want to participate in the new economy are able to find them in this new connected world. So how many people here owned a stock in Uber, 10 years ago? How many people owned, Netflix 10 years ago? How many people own, the list goes on. But if you open your phone, on your phone, I guarantee you there's about 10 apps that you use on a constant basis, but they're not in your portfolio. And the reason is, back then it was hard to find access to those companies or how to evaluate whether those investments make sense. But now, it's becoming much easier to access those companies earlier on and to leverage the experience of people like ROKK or other people to figure out whether these investments make change. What they say is by 2023, there will be $300 billion of crowdfunding capital available to entrepreneurs around the world. So good ideas are going to get funded, and they're getting funded on a global scale. So that gives us kind of the basis of this notion that we're living in the most exciting time and that the world is changing faster than ever. So if you think about what we said, just so that we can put it in context, right? We are now at about 4.39 billion people connected on the internet. We're going to get to 8 billion in a few years. The penetration is highly mobile driven. Most people are accessing the internet via their mobile phones, especially in emerging markets, in India, in Africa, in Latin America. And what's happening is we're starting to see cross-border data and bandwidth increasing at levels that we had never seen before. And what do I mean by that? So between 2015 and 2017 alone, we went from nothing to 150 times the amount of data, or about 700 terabytes per second of data is being transacted across the globe. In 1 second, we're transacting more data, which is people buying things, people streaming music, people chatting, using WhatsApp, using Instagram, 700 terabytes of data a second, which is more information than the entire US Library of Congress in 1 second. And that is continuing to increase. So you take basically, this connectivity, which is now becoming global, and you combine it with the fact that as humans, we are now able to create exponential technologies, and you are basically seeing a complete shift in how businesses, how governments, how society is evolving. So just to give you guys some numbers, just so it kind of sticks in your head. The average person, and this is not saying the United States, I'm not saying Europe, I'm saying the average user who is online on their mobile device spends 6 hours and 40 minutes a day on their phone or on the internet in one way or the other. That's 100 days a year of your life you're spending on the phone, on the internet. If you consider there's 4 billion people on the internet today, we're going to spend in 2019 1.2 billion years combined on the internet. So we're definitely shifting, where the world is going. So what is changing? Everything from, people to organizations to society. If you think about, this world where people have access to information, where people are able to get the same education, whether you're born in Nairobi or you're born in Ecuador or you're born in, Silicon Valley, you can access the same TED Talks, you can access the same iTunes University, you can access Stanford's online machine learning course. You basically have the same global intelligence that was once, even 5 or 10 years ago, not accessible to you. So how do you deal with a society that is changing like that? How do you build a company that can leverage these millions of people around the world who have skills that you are going to need for your business? If you think about even, I would say maybe 8 years ago or 9 years ago, you could not buy a commercial drone. It was just military use. About 7 years ago, you could buy a drone, but it cost a lot of money. About $100,000 people were buying, for fun, and this price started to go down. Last Christmas, in 2018 Christmas, I bought my nephew a drone. It was $35. It was this big, and it could do HD video. The price of this technology is changing to such a pace that it's becoming accessible. How many of you are familiar with the story of Kodak? So, it's an easy story to understand because it shows you the impact that we're talking about. So in the late 70s, an engineer at Kodak went to the board and said, hey, I have this device. It was, probably the size of this stand over here, and it's a digital camera. It takes black and white pictures at 0.5 megapixels. And the board laughed at him. He came back every year. Every year, the box got smaller and smaller and smaller, the megapixels got higher, but they just refused to listen to him. And I don't know if you remember, but even to maybe 10, 15 years ago, if I took a picture with my parents and I didn't smile the right way, or somebody moved, you got in trouble because they had to retake the picture. But the reason you got in trouble was they had to pay for the printing. They had to go to the store, pay for the printing, and what Kodak finally said to the engineer was, this is not a camera problem. We're a chemical and paper company. That's our business. And then what started happening is digital cameras came out to the market. So in the early, mid-90s, cameras were expensive, they were big, And if you went to buy a camera, you would almost pay half that price to buy a storage card. And you could only store 16 photos on that storage card. And what started happening, as we talked about with Moore's Law, things started getting cheaper, they started getting faster, and they started getting smaller. By the late 90s, digital cameras were anywhere from $100 to $300. But when you bought the digital camera, they gave you an SD card for free. And what happened is people started changing their behavior. So instead of having to pose properly for every picture, now you have a digital camera, you can take hundreds of photos. It didn't matter if you didn't smile in one. You just took more and more photos. What started happening is people stopped printing all the other photos. So you start seeing the shift in how society was working. And then you fast forward another 7 years to 2007, and then you have the iPhone, where the camera is no longer a separate piece of equipment. It's a button on your phone, right? So all of a sudden people start taking even more pictures, storage becomes less, and then you fast forward to Instagram, which is the most used photo site on the planet. They're worth, I don't know how many, over $50 billion as part of Facebook's group, right? And which Facebook paid for them. And the guys at Instagram did not need to know how to make a camera. They did not need to know how lenses and all that stuff worked. They didn't even need to know how the iPhone worked. All they needed to do was build an app, and people press a button, and all of a sudden you're taking pictures. But the shift that made Instagram so popular was, even in the 2000s, if you had a picture taken, say, at a wedding, and you wanted to get it touched up, you had to go to an expert. They would lighten the picture, they would darken it, they would create a great picture. But Instagram just gave people filters. So now, not only do I not need the camera, I can use my phone, but I don't even need the expertise that comes around pictures. I can do it myself. And that's the change that we're seeing. So understanding that, the business of innovating within companies is also changing. So if you understand the connectivity, if you understand the bandwidth issues, if you understand the intelligence, how are you now going to deal with artificial intelligence in your business? How are you going to deal with robotics? How are you going to deal with, nanotechnology? It doesn't matter what industry you're in or what, business you have. You are going to have to start thinking about how these capabilities are going to help you. So one of the things that's changing is the rise of what we call the company builders. Since it's easier now for people to start companies, whether you're, 2 kids out of school or you're an established organization, people are starting to want to build their own value based on the information and the knowledge they have. So company builders have been coming up because they allow those entrepreneurs, those corporations to build their own value. Entrepreneurship is now global. It doesn't matter, if you need an expert in machine learning and that person happens to be in Bulgaria, right? Today, especially at ROKK3R, we have access to experts, whether it's 3D printing, drone technology, nanotechnology, machine learning, artificial intelligence, computer vision, and it doesn't matter whether these people are. Our connectivity and our bandwidth allow us to collaborate in ways that were not possible even 5 years ago. So what's happening because of this is there's more prevalent early stage investment. We still can't fix the power. So I'll keep going if that's okay. Okay, so basically you're starting to see what I was talking about earlier when I asked, does anybody have, on their phone, do you own any of those companies? We're starting to see more relevant early stage investing because now you have access to information. You can make intelligent decisions about your investments. And what's even more interesting in the last 2 to 3 years per se is cryptocurrency and the blockchain are giving rise to a new type of funding alternative. So while in the US or in different countries you have specific rules about investing or how to access money, with the blockchain, with crypto, you're basically seeing global investors accessing global investments and being able to make smart decisions about it. So the shift in how people build, how people execute, and how people invest is happening in real time. So it all sounds great, right? I mean, the world is changing, we get it, but what's this infrastructure? how do you access this innovation if you're in a corporation? How do you access this innovation if you're an entrepreneur? So the way it works even today is if a company has a great idea or an entrepreneur has a great idea, it's a thought. How many times has someone come to you and said, man, I have a great idea? It happens all the time. What happens after that? Oh, I need a team. Okay. Oh, I know my nephew used to be a developer. My cousin has some money. Let's get a few people together and you build a company. It's a very inefficient way to build a company. The way it should look like is you have access, like we said, to 4 billion people who want to be consumers, who want to participate, who are ready to give you feedback. That example of Netflix is the perfect way that a company became the biggest producer of content in the world, right? They listened to the data. They basically leveraged the crowd to tell them what shows to make. They just released the first show made specifically for an Indian audience, filmed in an Indian language, launched on Netflix, that became the biggest watched show, not just in India, but around the world, right? Because they are able to see what people want to watch. So the way it should look like is you have access to lots of people that want to help you. And if people think that it's a good idea, you will find the experts that want to help you with that idea. And you'll find the money to help you with that idea. And when we were launching ROKK3R, one of the things that we've been doing over the years is we've been studying the amount of money that gets wasted when it comes to innovation and when it comes to entrepreneurship. And that's a $500 billion a year industry that is being wasted. The model is old. The model is based on an old venture capital model of saying, hey, what they had was an abundance of capital. So what they said is, to mitigate risk, we're going to spend a lot of money. We are okay with a 3% success rate. What industry today is okay with a 3% success rate? None. But they're hoping that that 3% becomes big enough to pay back the rest of the investment. So when you look at the amount of capital that is being lost, you realize that there is a big opportunity. And that opportunity comes in different forms, but based on what we talked about: access to talent, the ability to mitigate risk, the ability to use the crowd to test your product or your idea. So that's why we built ROKK3R. ROKK3R, is a global innovation and consulting firm. We're the first co-built platform. And what we do is we work with corporations, we work with entrepreneurs, we work with governments, and we help them build on their exponential vision. So as opposed to, a consulting effort, what we try and do is we try and instill the mentality of a startup into the project so that you're accelerating your idea with technology, with strategy, in a way that actually matches the technology we have available and the expertise we have available. So it all translates really in terms of numbers, right? When you think about what we do, the first thing we try and do is we try and go from linear to exponential. So when you look at an idea, when you look at a potential innovation, a lot of times when we speak to people, they say, look, what I'm really looking for is a 10% efficiency gain in my production line. That's linear growth. That's not what we're interested in. What we're trying to figure out is, can you make that production line 10 times faster, 100 times faster? Can you make it 100 times cheaper? Can we leverage different technologies to provide you that exponential leap? And what the business case for these, because all this innovation comes at the cost of an investment, whether it's an investment in time, an investment in resources, or an investment just in your mental space, right? And when you look at over the last 6 years alone, what we've been able to do is within the first 6 to 12 months of working on an idea or an innovation, we are able to take an idea, create a real product and capability out of it, and 3x or to 6x the value of that investment in innovation. And when I say 3x or 6x, that's 300% or 600% the value of that investment in that company. And the big thing is, as opposed to having those 97% failure rates, we are able to get up to 60% of these companies into that 3 to 6x success ratio. So through the capabilities that we provide, we're able to allow these companies to basically achieve the innovation that they need to achieve in order to survive. So when you think about, how this works, usually what people do is they say, okay, I need to get I need a strategy consulting service. And they'll do a consulting effort. And the consultants will walk away and leave you with a bunch of, recommendations and strategy, but no implementation. Then you have to go find a team that is willing to match that strategy to implement, which then becomes, an effort. I would say 99% of companies we talk to, when we talk to the chief innovation officer or the people that are responsible for innovation, and one of the first questions we like asking them is, okay, show me the product that you built this month. No? Show me the product you built in 3 months. Oh, 6 months. And the answer we get 95 to 99% of the time is, oh, no. Innovation is a process. It takes 2 to 3 years, but in 2 to 3 years, there's going to be 8 billion people online. The pace of innovation needs to occur in a more holistic ecosystem. So one of the things that we provide is the full ecosystem around the mindset, the strategy, the execution, which includes the technology, and then actually funding. So we provide all of that, and we're doing it in a way that is much more affordable than accessing Silicon Valley, right? Especially because of where we are. We're in Miami, we're in Bogota, we're in Ecuador, we're in the emerging markets of the world. And we've done over, 200 plus ideas. We've built over 48 companies. Over 40 of them are still alive in that 3 to 6x return ratio. And we have a bunch of companies that are very well that you're probably going to hear about in the very near future. So we make it accessible for companies, for entrepreneurs to access this innovation. The first thing that we realized is that not everybody speaks the same language. So when I talk about exponential growth or exponential technologies, it's great to have this conversation, but maybe you are going to get it. Does your team get it? Do they understand how it works? So the first thing we try and do is make sure that everybody is on the same page, right? And then we take them through this process, because most people actually have a business that they're running. They've already built, a brand. They've built assets. They have infrastructure. They may have factories or logistics, or they already have something they can leverage. And one of the first things we do is go through that process, and we call it a think phase, to figure out what exponential technologies, what organizational structure, what idea fits the best with what you already have to create an exponential company. And with most of these organizations, it's hard to argue with the fact that you're making lots of money every year, right? You do not want to lose that, obviously. So what we do with a lot of these companies is we create what we call startups on the edge of the organization, something that's not limited by the bureaucracy. Because let's face it, in most companies, innovation is either as important as your numbers at the end of the quarter, or as important as the budget that you're provided. And in a lot of cases, those two things don't align to allow you to innovate. So we provide different structures to allow companies to go through that structure. And one of the things we realized as we started doing this about 2 or 3 years ago, what we said is, hey, we're seeing all these ideas from zero, but we're not capitalizing on what we're talking about, which is that investment portion of it. So about 2 years ago, we launched our own venture capital fund that became part of our ecosystem. And that's a $200 million fund that basically looks at ideas, whether they come from corporations, whether it comes from government, whether it comes from entrepreneurs. And once it goes through the co-build or building of the first version, we can then bring our own funding to allow these ideas to scale. So it became a big part of the ecosystem. And I'll just give you 2 quick examples, and we can obviously talk about more. These are 2 of our more mature companies, over 3 years old. At Mobilized came to us, and the idea Rodolfo, who's the founder, had was he was tired of putting stickers on his car and in his, on his computer and his backpack, and he basically came to us and he said, you know what, why should I put a Nike sticker on my car and not get paid for it? So his initial idea was, I want to be exponential. And what he said is, I'm going to get these iPads, I'm going to put them in backpacks, and I'm going to give them to students, and they can pick what brand they want to advertise, and the advertisers are going to pay me. Sounds like a great idea. But when you start thinking about the logistics of backpacks and iPads and students and an ad network, you start realizing the operational complexity. Instead, what we said is, let's spend more time and actually build technology around computer vision, around machine learning, around artificial intelligence. And where Mobilized is today, it's basically working with some of the biggest out-of-home sign providers, Bright Sign, Clear Channel, big companies like Home Depot, where they have little beacons that they put, like they could put here, for example, and we can say how many people are in the room. We can say how many are male, how many are female. We can even say if you're happy or sad, right? That type of data was never available. The big thing they say about billboards is they're effective 50% of the time. I just don't know which 50% of the time they're effective because there's no data, right? So with this type of company, we're able to provide that value. And we started at Mobilized at about a $500,000 investment. At Mobilized in the last round, which closed last year, was worth $28 million. So that over 40x return in a 3-year time frame is exactly what we're trying to achieve. Hyper is, they're going to announce it, I think, tomorrow or today, for the second year in a row, was voted as one of the most innovative companies by Fast Company. And what Hyper does is extremely exponential. Hyper puts virtual geofences around locations. What that means is they can listen to the social media, what people are talking about. For example, say you're at a hotel, and the hotel you go have dinner at the restaurant, and your food is cold. It comes out cold. And I take a picture of the food, I put it on Instagram, I have thousands of followers, and I'm like, never gonna eat here again, the food was cold. In real time, Hyper is listening at that location. It then sends a message to the concierge, the waiter, to the team. They come back over to me within 5 minutes and say, hey, we're sorry, we're gonna get you another meal, it's free, you can come back again, let's take a picture, you post it. In real time, they're able to fix that consumer happiness moment. Hyper is now has contracts with Marriott, the NFL, Disney, a bunch of different companies, and Hyper's last round was over $53 million last year. So, we blew it again. So, the next slide is actually interesting. And those were companies that were 3 years old, right? But in the last 12 months alone, we have over 4 companies that I can show you that we just started with, initial investments of $300,000 to $500,000 that in less than 12 months are now being valued at a minimum of $2.5 million. So the return on your investment from an innovation perspective is the quickest and highest it's ever been through this process. So the good thing about this is that these companies are not just coming from the United States. We have companies in that list that come from Ecuador, we have companies in that list that come from Colombia, we have companies in that list that come from England, right? So we are starting to see this global flow of these companies that basically allow us to tap different areas of exponential growth and technology to create the value. Is it back on? Yeah, just I don't know if I'll take a drink. So, how do you boost the value? And what we've realized is that there's a process, right, that a company needs to go through to break down the ideas, to figure out what makes the most sense, and how to put teams around these ideas. Actually, this is the slide I was talking about. In the last 12 months, we've built these companies. Flamingo, for example, is less than 60 days old, and already we raised over $300,000 now at a $4 million valuation for Flamingo. Berry Block is a blockchain-based company starting in Colombia that is using the blockchain to verify file transfer and transactions for fintech. Joule is a chat-based system where you can go and make quick fixes to your websites, to your technology. And SciTrust is actually a company that started out of here through a company called Seguros Confianza that we started to launch in England as a marketplace for cybersecurity, insurance, and networks. So these are all different companies that, and there's a lot more, but these are just 4 examples of just the last year of companies that we've started and built and whose value we're raising. So there are different capabilities like we talked about. I think the big thing is that we, like I was saying, is we have this path now that we have done over 50 times of how to create value, how to go from zero, because ideas are they're already receiving offers from Salesforce, from Adobe, from Oracle, who want to buy Hyper before Hyper becomes the next big competitor, right? We are using a lot of the financial metrics and scorecards that these institutions are using to value and grade these companies as building blocks for our companies. So let me give you an example. A lot of times when people want to start building, a company or product, they think, I need to build this massive mobile app, or I need to build a platform. A lot of times what you need to do is you need to build who the buyer is going to be first, right? So with that Mobilized, where we know BrightSign is very interested. Avnet, which is publicly traded, is very interested. With Hyper, we targeted Salesforce, we targeted Adobe to create these partnerships because we know that they are interested in these types of companies. And we show them all the way from the team capabilities to the product market fit to how this company is going to match their investment criteria to actually build an investment company. The other thing that's interesting is our focus on Latin America. So, why Latin America? Why now? What's so interesting right now? And one of the interesting facts, and I'm not sure if you guys knew this, is there are 47 mega cities around the world. And mega cities are cities where there's over 10 million people, the population is over 10 million people. 6 of those 47 cities are found in Latin America. There's 15 of them that are found in China. So you start seeing that there's a big concentration in urban areas where people are flocking to in terms of where they want to live. And it's interesting because it changes the dynamic of what type of companies people want to build. Even 5 years ago, when we said, hey, we want to build technology companies for Latin America, people would say to us, there's no way somebody's going to buy, TV online in Latin America. We don't trust it. There's no way we're going to buy our groceries through the phone. There's no way I'm going to call, a car on my phone. 3 years ago, maybe even less. But the adoption rate has dramatically changed in Latin America. And it's changed because more people have access to mobile phones. More people have access to the internet. So the adoption cycle, right, becomes so much quicker than what you think it is, which is a big change. And what that does is it changes the consumer perspective. There's a lowering of that barrier of trust that is happening around the world, right? This advancing of mobile technology is increasing the adoption rate from people who would have in the past not wanted to, be part of that ecosystem. Now there's trust that's built into this mobile commerce ecosystem that allows the growth of a lot of different types of companies, especially in Latin America, right? So that answers the question of how, right? But what's changing now is this opportunity for on-demand services. So if you think about society structure, like we talked about before, that's changing, there is a growing middle class in the emerging market. Whether it's Latin America, whether it's India, whether it's Africa, the largest spending and growing class is the middle class. And these are people that are used to a service model that is changing, right? So you think of a company like Uber. When Uber, puts out their marketing, or when they talk about what they want to do, they don't go and say, we want to be the biggest company by 10%. We want to be the biggest taxi company in Kenya. That's not what they do. What they do is they go to those emerging markets, to those mega cities, and they say everybody deserves a personal driver. So whether you're middle class, whether you just got your first mobile phone and you have a few dollars to spend, just like in the past when it was only the rich that could access a personal driver, it is now becoming open to these societies, to mobile users, to have that same type of service. And that, combined with the trust factor, is changing how Latin America, how Africa, how even some parts of Europe and Asia are changing the types of businesses that they're investing in and that they're building. So the demand in investment in Latin America is growing. So while the U.S. Is primarily focused on the U.S. and North America, China, for example, for the past few years, has focused its investment strategy on Africa and Latin America because it's the fastest growing emerging market. And what's happening now is you're starting to see the bigger exits, the bigger investments happen in Latin American countries. So, Ripio, you talk about Linio, which was an e-commerce company in Mexico that got acquired, a few years ago. There's a lot of different companies that are now receiving that value on a global scale from investors outside the country. And from a numbers perspective, last year alone, out of the 12 companies we built, 6 of them came from Latin America. So the year before that it was 3, and the year before that it was 1. So we are starting to see a lot more companies come through Latin America, and it's not just us. If you look at some of the other funds, you look at companies like Y Combinator, Techstars, all the big innovation startup companies, the amount of Latin American companies going through those ecosystems is increasing exponentially. And the investment is flowing into those companies, right? The demand in Latin America is growing really fast. And there's more Bitcoin ATMs in Buenos Aires than there is in the entire New York City. These emerging markets are taking to blockchain, they're taking to cryptocurrency, they're using technology in a jump, in a leap. People are going direct to mobile. So if you think about the adoption in Europe of mobile, it happened because most people didn't have landline technology to connect to the internet. In Africa, for example, they went from no internet to basically 2G and 3G overnight. So it wasn't like they took the 15, 30 years that the US has taken to go from landline to dial-up to fiber to mobile. And those speeds are going from 2G to 5G, Wi-Fi everywhere. Bandwidth is becoming very cheap. So the demand in turn is driving adoption of innovation. So what do we think the key opportunities are? What are some of the sectors, some of the types of companies that we think are interesting? A big one is fintech, especially in emerging markets where people are accessing banking, accessing financial services, things like loans, things like payments, but primarily on mobile devices. And the largest growth, remember the penetration in Latin America is less than 40% even today of mobile users. It is going to be the biggest growth in terms of mobile user adoption over the next 3 to 5 years. And all these people are going to need services around financial services, around loans, around school, etc. Blockchain, for example, is becoming a big part of the way Latin America and Africa are conducting business in terms of shipping, logistics, consumer goods, where they're using the blockchain to verify transactions. Right? Automation and robotics are becoming now things that are coming to Latin America in a big way, all the way from manufacturing, 3D printing, drones. We're starting to see a lot more investment and use of those types of technologies to help traditional industries survive. Clean tech and mobility, all the way from nanotech type of solutions to solve pollution to mobility solutions, right? We're seeing things like scooter companies launch in Latin America and do very well. Electric scooters, things that in urbanly dense mega cities become things people want to pay for. Nobody wants to buy a car anymore, right? And the next shift was, well, I don't want to buy a car, but I want to use Uber or Lyft. But now I have this little electric scooter that I can pay pennies. Like in San Francisco, I took a scooter last week, 20 blocks for $1. I don't even need to get into an Uber. Those are now coming to Latin America. So we're seeing a lot of these changes occur. So very quickly, just to wrap it up, because I know it's been a while, what are really the implications? What I would want you guys to take away from this is there are a lot more people coming online. They're coming online faster than you think. They have access to information that is democratizing their intelligence as a consumer, that is democratizing their capability as an execution partner, that is democratizing their ability to be a good investor for your companies. And it's happening at rates that we don't think is possible, but it's happening. How many of you are familiar with online gaming, for example? Of the 4 billion people connected online, 1 billion people go online to watch other people play video games. I mean, 3-4 years ago, this was not a business, right? 1 billion people go online to watch people play a game called Fortnite, right, which a lot of the kids are playing. State Farm last week just announced that they're giving the single most expensive endorsement not to a basketball player, not to a soccer player, but to an online gamer. Because there's more people watching online gaming than people watch the World Cup final. Just think, so the change that we're seeing, the implications are vast. So, when you think about a corporation, it's no longer your marketplace. It's a global marketplace. And you have to figure out how are you going to adapt with the use of technology, with the access to information and technology, so that you are relevant in your industry or as an offshoot of your industry, so that you can actually capture all this new business that's coming online. So while it looks like there's a lot of issues, the opportunity is almost massive. In the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to have access to double the market. So you have to figure out what is it that you want to do to take advantage of that. So I think that was enough to kind of give you a summary of where everything is. Obviously, we can talk about different things in detail, but if you have any questions, now is the time that we can answer them. No?
This is investment. It's just for technological industry or manufacturing industry.
A fund?
Yeah.
No, so from a fund perspective, what we look for from an investment criteria is, does this company have exponential technology that it's using? So it could be manufacturing, but it has to be, yes, it would have to have some sort of technology component that we believe is going to give it that 10x return. But we're not industry specific, so it's not like we're looking at a specific industry. We're looking at the technology underlying the industry.
So I have a question. Do you have any, it's more like I'm asking for a suggestion. What do you think regarding, my name is Harry, and my question is about business in general. So what happens if you have like a distribution or an actual business that is running? You were talking that, of course, we can have a perfect business, but you were talking about the first business, the top business in the US, and probably in a decade they will just drop. So the question is, what happens if you want to use technology or be part of this game and try to adapt your business to the next step? What would be your suggestion?
So, the way we look at it is, if you have an existing business, right, that's already generating revenue, right? I didn't say this, the guys at Google said this, they said revenue sets you free, right? So if you're generating revenue on one side of the house, what you can then do is you can experiment with innovation based on the assets that you already have, right? And that's what we call these startups on the edge of the organization. So when we start working with a company, what we do is we try and figure out what pieces of what you already have can become the transition into an exponential business while your business is currently running. We do not want to disrupt your revenue stream at all. But also, we do not want to be part of the bureaucracy that comes with an existing business that limits the innovation. So the first thing is that the leaders of the business have to be aligned in that what we're trying to do is generate an exponential value on the side of the existing business, leveraging, for example, the Citrust example, and we can talk a little more about it, but it's an established company. But for an Ecuadorian company to sell insurance in the United States, let alone the UK, I mean, it's a big, massive leap, it's a pain. But taking the concepts and creating this new company around cybersecurity and insurance, we were able to create a new company for them, launch it in the UK, not even in the US, because that's where the market is. So that's how I would look at it. You have to maintain your business for a little while, but you have to have, almost 1.5 feet into the future, right? So that's how we consider doing it.
On one of your first slides, it said something about demonetization. Something about demonetization. Can you explain a bit about it?
Monetization?
Yeah.
So basically, we are achieving basically a scale where technology is becoming free, right? All these companies are trying to basically provide you technology, like the mobile devices, at almost a cost that is associated with you being the user. So if you look at, how even like cameras, right? They went from devices to basically being a commodity, to being an app, a button on your phone. It's creating the demonetization of entire industries because people can now access what you used to provide as a resource that was scarce in an abundant way. So I have access to all the information to access the right, product or service you provide at the best cost. And no matter what you do marketing-wise, or no matter how good your product is, if the rest of the world says it's not good, the value of your offering diminishes to zero. So we have to look at all those different factors when we're looking at these industries.
Grow in your portfolio, right?
Yes.
And you didn't mention countries, but the population of each country.
Yes.
Of course, that's important. But what's also important is what resources each country has in terms of people, education, and in terms of facilities that they provide to investors. So what country should we follow as Ecuador not to copy but to assimilate what they're doing?
I mean, I think there's two parts to that, and I'll let Herman answer this a lot too, unless you want to. As a region.
We all share common history, a language, and for years, even though we share that same history and language, for a company to go from one country to another was very hard, right? As Nabyl was saying, just to go think of opening an insurance company in another country, let alone England, was a huge investment. We created a company with less than $400,000, right? So that's very interesting. Before we had a very small little class that had disposable income, and if you joined that class in all of the Latin America, you wouldn't get to 1 million people. And suddenly with this middle class, and with the less barriers between countries, you can actually get to 600 million people, which is twice the size of Europe. And when you have half of those people unbanked, then you know that there's a huge business there, right? And that the same solution that you might have created in Bolivia might help somebody in Guatemala in a fintech solution. Then you suddenly have a very interesting market. That's what we see. That's why we are investing much more in Latin America. A little, they call it the invisible continent. Everybody knows it's there, everybody knows it's big, but nobody invests. So we said, no, we're going to invest because it's becoming a reality, and it's not only the trends or the economic numbers, it's also that suddenly Mercado Libre is everywhere. So now we have things, the adoption rates are much higher. Suddenly Rappi, which didn't exist 3 years ago, is in 7 countries. And you never thought of it, right? And so you're seeing that suddenly Latin America, it is really a region, and it's a huge one. It's not anymore 1 million people with access to disposable income. Suddenly it's a 600 million market. That's one part. The other part is that smaller countries, surprisingly, are advantageous. In general, this is kind of, we call it the time of David, right, versus Goliath. Smaller countries can experiment quickly, can change quickly. For example, to create robotics or a robot legislature in the US is going to be impossible. You're going to have to deal with 50 states, the FDA, but maybe in Bolivia or in Ecuador, you can convince a couple of people and you're going to create a whole robotics policy that can then be exported, right? So that's a big part of why we invest in Latin America. What to emulate? It's really kind of, and I will say this, right? It's, for example, there's been a lot of questions about this blockchain thing, right? Only 2017, completely unregulated, a lot of money invested and then spent and then disappeared. So a lot of regulators are coming in. But the biggest success is the auto-regulation. So suddenly investors ask much better questions when they're investing on blockchain because they know what could happen if it's not a real business model. It's too hard for the law to be as fast as technology. So now we have this genetics problem, right? Suddenly people are doing DNA testing anywhere because now you can do it in a garage in China, in Bolivia with no regulation. It used to be a self-regulated industry. It's going to have to, regulation is going to have to be self-regulated anyway. It has to be enough opportunity to advance, to have the mechanisms to protect investors.
Yeah, I would say you have to take advantage of the natural resources or assets you already have, but you cannot look at it as a country. You have to look at it as a region, and we have to look at it as a global business. So, and you know, if from a geopolitical perspective, and maybe we don't want the conversation to deviate too far, when we talk about the mega cities, right? What's starting to happen, even in countries like Brazil, in countries in Africa, the city-state is driving a lot more of the legislation, of the policy, of the economic power than the actual country. Right, so it's actually changing in real time, and we say there's going to be a few people that dictate the rules. It's going to be big corporations and big cities. Those are the two. Those are the government in terms of country being able to legislate things. It's becoming very hard for them to participate in this new economy. The U.S. missed out on over $1 trillion of blockchain investment in 2016 to 2018. Even this year, the rules are not clear. The rules are not clear. So what's happening? Countries like Malta, right? Countries like Switzerland are basically welcoming all of these investors when all of a sudden a country like Malta, which was never a financial capital, is all of a sudden a crypto financial capital of the world.
Or another country that's interesting is Israel.
Yeah.
So, for example, from Colombia, very much Latin American governments, I don't know why, think that to take equity stakes in companies is a conflict of interest. Like, how can a government invest in a company and not in another? It's a conflict of interest that should be good to all. Israel invested in their companies.
They own equity in the government owns equity.
Increasing taxes, they invested in companies that made them become richer. It's a completely different case. It never happened before.
It's like in Norway, the biggest
Yeah.
sovereign fund is from
It's
Norway.
Norway.
Its investment is in every company in the world.
Yeah.
The best companies.
China, right, with Alibaba, Tencent, right?
Yeah,
That's, I think, a big part of the geopolitical change.
Thank you.
Por favor, Ernesto, quisiera antes que concluya esta sesión que dirijas un caso, que converses con Nabyl acerca de un caso práctico de innovación que ustedes hayan acelerado.
He wants us to share in more detail a case that we have, a case study that we have, successfully worked in Ecuador. Nabyl, I don't know if
Just you can do Spanish, it probably
okay. Hace aproximadamente 2 años y medio, Javier Cárdenas, de Seguros Confianza, y puedo contar el caso porque ya lo cuentan ellos y la compañía además ya está en el mercado, es decir, no estoy en este momento cometiendo ningún tipo de pecado, ¿no? Se nos acercó Javier Cárdenas y que ya había trabajado con nosotros mucho tiempo antes, etc. Y nos dijo, a ver, yo quiero innovar, pero yo estoy aquí en Ecuador, en un nicho, en el mercado de fianzas, de seguros de crédito. Yo no voy a ir a competir al mercado de seguros masivos y no me salgo de aquí. Este es un mundo muy riesgoso el mío, el de fianzas, y por lo pronto soy líder de mercado. Mi segunda generación está en el negocio, es una segunda generación de mi familia muy preparada, pero líder de mercado, de fianzas, y solamente es cuestión de tiempo que las multinacionales dominen el riesgo del mercado de fianzas y se metan en mi nicho. Entonces, qué aburrido es para mí decirle a mis hijos, defiendan esta compañía para el resto de sus días. Es decir, o yo salgo a hacer algo agresivo, o yo voy a desaparecer más rápido de lo que pienso. Entonces trabajamos, y quiero también que ustedes, digamos que extrapolen lo que les digo a sus propios sectores, porque Javier dijo, ok, no tengo idea qué negocio vamos a emprender, lo que tengo claro es que quiero salir al mundo y ayúdenme a encontrar una oportunidad. Y así, ese pensamiento y esa manera de pensar de Javier es algo que tenemos que hacer nosotros propia, porque si no lo hacen ustedes propia esa manera de pensar, su competidor sí lo va a hacer. Y entonces trabajamos con Javier y llegamos a esta oportunidad después de un proceso de 8 semanas. Llegamos a esta oportunidad de detección, llegamos a detectar esta oportunidad que se llama Cyber Trust, ¿no? Entonces, como dijo Nabyl, la compañía está en Londres, no tiene que estar en Guayaquil, y la montamos en el sitio donde más favorecía al emprendimiento, porque Londres evidentemente es un centro mundial de la industria de los seguros. Quien dirige Cytrust es un joven, si no me equivoco es alemán, muy bien preparado. Entonces tienen ustedes capital y emprendedor ecuatoriano. La compañía se monta en Londres. Quien lleva esto en la práctica, en el día a día, es un joven alemán muy orientado a resultados. Ese es el mundo de hoy. Y si no pensamos, por ejemplo, como Javier, el competidor de ustedes que está en la esquina, en Ecuador lo va a estar pensando. Y ese es el mecanismo. Entonces, ya los detalles del trabajo y cómo se lleva adelante un proyecto, bueno, eso quien esté interesado lo podremos conversar. Aquí nos conocemos y los contactos los tenemos todos, pero en todo caso el proceso de pensamiento y cómo se aterriza una idea es esa. Y aparte de mencionarles el caso de Cytrust, que ahí lo puso Nabyl, de que el retorno de Cytrust ahora y por la valoración que tuvo, para lo que ha invertido el accionista es de 6 veces. Entonces, otras cosas que hacemos, y vemos un interés muy grande en Ecuador, y creemos que esto también le hace un gran bien al país, Son grupos de empresarios que se juntan porque, así como en el pasado, entre 3 amigos nos hemos juntado a decir, oye, ¿por qué no hacemos algo? Y por allí en el pasado hemos montado, por decir algo, un taller de reparación de automóviles. Ahora ya no, ahora se están juntando empresarios aquí en Guayaquil, en Quito, y en otras partes también, pero quiero mencionar el caso nuestro, el que conocemos, digamos, en carne y hueso. Y estos grupos de empresarios, 5 o 6, dicen, ok, aquí entre los 5 o 6 reunimos un montón de conocimiento de cada industria que tenemos. Entonces queremos ver en qué emprendemos. Obviamente que cada uno tiene sus inversiones, sus negocios, pero una parte pequeñita de su inversión quieren ponerla en un emprendimiento que pertenezca a esta cuarta revolución industrial. Entonces tenemos estos laboratorios que le llamamos laboratorios de negocios exponenciales. En Guayaquil tenemos el primero, que ya tiene una compañía también en el mercado, está en el mundo de logística. De nuevo, la compañía se la creó en México, porque esta oportunidad es solamente para el ámbito latinoamericano, y no me voy a extender demasiado, ¿no? Pero se la monta en México porque México es un país mucho más preparado que Ecuador, o listo que Ecuador, hoy, para un negocio B2B con una plataforma y que se realicen transacciones entre empresas. Entonces el negocio se lo monta en México. No tardará mucho ese negocio en venir a Ecuador, como Cytrust, que está en Londres, en venir a Ecuador, porque es una plataforma y es solamente como Uber, de entrar de un país a otro, de un día a otro. Entonces, grupos de empresarios emprendiendo, eso nos llena de optimismo. Y otra cosa que también se generó por demanda y nos encanta, y es algo que vimos la demanda y es algo que estamos impulsándolo mucho, es que empresarios ecuatorianos dicen, ¿por qué no creamos con ROKK un venture builder en mi sector? ¿Ya? Por poner ese ejemplo. Y en este momento, ahí sí no puedo decir quién, ni qué sector, pero ya estamos por crear la primera co-constructora de startups digitales exponenciales en Ecuador, con una persona que lo lidera, pero que no pretende que sea de él, sino que él va a abrir el capital a otras personas de su mismo sector de la economía, para que de allí nazcan startups que salgan a ser las compañías del futuro de ese sector, ¿ya? Les pongo solamente un ejemplo de fintech. Y alguien luego que me arranche el micrófono porque cuando me sale lo académico ya entonces me voy ahora. Pero les decía que en el tema de la creación de la creación de compañía, ¿no? Estos venture builders, ¿qué ocurre con el sector de fintech? ¿Y qué ocurre con Ecuador? Me parece que la fuente es el Banco Mundial, pero pudiese estarles mintiendo porque por ahí me puedo equivocar y no confío en mi memoria, pero creo que es el Banco Mundial. Hace 2 meses leía que hay 1.164 compañías que pertenecen al fintech en Latinoamérica. Están concentradas en 3 países, ¿no? México, me parece que es México, Brasil y Colombia o Chile. 3 países, más de la mitad de esas 1.164 startups en fintech. En Ecuador no aparecemos en el radar. Y eso es lo que el empresario ecuatoriano está viendo, de que esto se desarrolla en otros países vecinos. Y nosotros, en cambio, nos estamos quedando cortos, sabiendo que el capital, como bien decía Nabyl, circula libremente por todo el mundo. Entonces, en el Ecuador están pasando cosas interesantísimas, ya sea creando venture builders en sectores de la economía, creando grupos de empresarios que quieren emprender en esta era digital, o también como ustedes en negocios como Cytrust, creando un negocio al margen de la empresa, ¿no? Así que yo esto quería comentarles. Y por último, esto sí es por último de verdad. No hay sector de la economía aburrido donde no se pueda innovar. El otro día me reunía con una compañía de alimentos y rápidamente me dijo, Ernesto, el ser humano se va a alimentar toda la vida. ¿Qué me puedes venir aquí a decir de rollos de alimentación? Y yo le dije rápidamente, mira, solamente 2 ejemplos. Memphis Meats, Memphis como la ciudad, Memphis Meats. Esto es carne elaborada a partir de células en un laboratorio. Esto va a ser industrial muy pronto, porque Memphis Meats ya hace albóndigas, ya hace carnes de aves de corral, ya en Memphis Meats invirtió Bill Gates, ya invirtió Richard Branson del Virgin Group y ya invirtió Cargill. Y en noviembre del 2018, pueden googlearlo, el FDA dijo: no tenemos absolutamente ningún inconveniente con Memphis Meats, porque lo que están ofreciendo es carne. Y les dije luego, miren, además de Memphis Meats, miren, es decir, no vamos a tener que matar vacas o ni criar vacas ni matar vacas para alimentarnos de carne en el futuro muy cercano. Y lo otro es Soylent, ¿ya? Es un líquido nutricional perfectamente diseñado para nosotros y que pueden también googlearlo y ver la compañía en la página web. Es un líquido, también puede estar en polvo, todos los sabores que hasta ahora han sido posibles, y cada vez van a personalizar más los ingredientes para mi propio ADN. Entonces, hoy ya, eso se lo escuchamos en Miami a Salim Ismail el 31 de octubre que tuvimos un evento, ya hay personas que han ya tienen alimentándose con Soylent 8 meses, mejor salud, mejores parámetros sanguíneos, han bajado de peso. Lo único es que están más aburridos que una ostra, porque a punta de Soylent vivir 8 meses es complicado. No quiero un bife de chorizo de verdad. Pero en todo caso, ahí tienes ya 2 compañías que están marcando tendencia y que va a cambiar al 2025 la manera como nos alimentamos. Entonces solamente le di a esta compañía de alimentos 2 ejemplos para que vean tendencias. Entonces, en esta sala y en todo el Ecuador no hay ningún sector de la economía y ninguna empresa aburrida que no esté, digamos, y que no esté sujeta a la innovación. Así que quería solamente aterrizar un poco esto para traducirlo más al lenguaje ecuatoriano, porque aquí están pasando cosas muy, muy, muy interesantes.
Muchas gracias, Ernesto, por tu intervención. A todos ustedes por venir, a Estoes por la traducción que nos ha acompañado. Muchas gracias por ese servicio. Nabyl, thank you for your excellent conference. I have a present for you. Remember it.